Good morning, everyone. My name's Channing, and welcome to Project Swan. So just to kick off and explain a little bit about what Project Swan is, we're going to teach Python. Basically, Project Swan is all about Python programming. We're going to walk you through the basics and take you all the way up to being Python masters. So if you stick with us in the next few weeks, you're going to learn lots of tips and tricks about programming in Python. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to ask you guys to do is open up this JetBrains PyCharm Community Edition. Your edition might be slightly different to mine, but that shouldn't be too much of a problem. So let's just double click that. So now that you've opened up PyCharm, the first thing you're going to want to do is create a new project. Now you're going to get a screen like this, and as you can see, you've got to give a location and you've got to give an interpreter. So I'm going to go ahead up here and change the location name to being something appropriate, like introduction. Now, as you can see, the interpreter is actually filled in, but just in case it doesn't, you just hit the cog, press add local, and then you'll find that in your main drive, you're going to have a Python 3.4 folder like this one. So you just go to the drop down and you find the python.exe file and you hit OK. And that will give you the correct interpreter. As you guys are running Python 3.4, your interpreter is going to have an extension like this, 3.4 point something. So let's just let it go ahead and do that. And then I'd like you to hit create. Okay, and there we go. Really straightforward. So the first thing I'm actually going to show you guys is how we create our first Python file. So now we've created the project, we need to make the first Python file. So what we do is we right-click the name of our project, which here is introduction. And we don't go to any drop-downs yet. There's nothing there anyway, but we wouldn't need to. We right-click it, and then this pops up. And we go to new, and then we select Python file. Now we just give it an appropriate name. So I'm going to call it, again, introduction. But I'm going to use a lowercase because in Python, lowercases, it's better to use lowercases. It's just the way that the language is written. It's just easier to do. So I can do that. Okay. Now we have our very first Python file. Yay! I also suggest at this point, it's very handy, we press view, hit active editor, and then go show line numbers. And that way, if we ever get errors later, it's easy to find them. I'm going to show you something quickly. I've just done 2 hash signs because I'm going to write a comment, which is basically a piece of text that isn't read by that interpreter that we just selected. So I'm just going to write here variables so that we know what we're working with. I hit enter, and as you can see, we're working, that's all grayed out, but now we're just typing normally again. Okay. So the first variables I'm going to tell you about are string variables. But first, let's explain what a variable is. A variable is basically a piece of as a storage. We use variables to store a piece of information. That could be a piece of text, a number, a true or false, a decimal. There's a whole bunch of things that we can have in our variables. But the first variable and variable type that I'm going to show you is strings. So let's create a string. There I go with my hashes again, just so that we've got a word there so we know what we're working with. So to create a variable, we first use a variable name. Now this can be anything you like, but do remember that it's again important to write accurate names. So I'm going to make a variable called name. Now, when we construct variables, we need to say the name of the variable followed by an equal sign, because this means whatever that name is equals, and then you're giving it a value. So name equals, and in this case we want a string, so we need to put in some quotation marks. Now, we use quotation marks when we want to write a piece of text. That can be a word, a single letter, or a sentence. So in this case, I'm going to put name as Channing Gardner. Great, so we've just created our very first variable. Now, I can make hundreds and thousands of variables, but all I need to do to make sure that they're easily defined and understood is give them different names. So I could say, so what our variables are, as I say again, is a way of storing bits of information. Okay, so we've done a string. I could do another string, which I would call color. I could go ahead and call that red. I could have one called material. I could go ahead and put wool. We could do loads of examples, but these are all strings, as you can see. Okay, enough strings. Another variable type that we're going to learn today is called int. Now, what are ints? Ints is short for integer. And what an integer is a whole number. It could be a big number or a little one, but it's always a number. It can also be a minus number, but it has to be a whole number. That's what an int is. So let's give an example of how we can go about making it a variable that's of type int. So I'm going to create a variable called size. So I've called it size, there's my equals again, and then I'm going to put a number. So I'm going to say 12. Yes, as hard as it is to believe, I am a size 12. Okay, that's brilliant. So now you've made a string variable and you've made an int variable. Now there's one more type of variable that I'd like to cover, and that variable is called Boolean. Now, Boolean, or bool for short as it is in Python, is a very unique kind of variable. Booleans can only be true or false, because in real life when we have probabilities. Okay, so as you can see, I've put in tails as my variable name for my Boolean. I then use that equals again. And as you can see, as I said before, Booleans can only be true or false. So I've set my Boolean to being true. Now, I think it's important to see what's actually happening when we code like this. So I'm going to make what we call a print statement, which will basically print out everything that we have coded so far. So let's take a look at how to do this. So I'm going to write, there's my hash again, writing a print statement. So at the beginning of writing a print statement, we write print. We press the brackets. Now, as you can see, we've got 2 brackets, and PyCharm will actually help finish this problem for us. So in those brackets, you want to write our 3 variable names. Okay, so we're going to start with name. Because we don't want all of these variables to be stuck together, we have to put spaces in them. So we're going to put name. We're going to create a string with a space in it. So that's just those brackets, those quotation marks again, with a space in it. So now we're going to have a space between the name variable and the next thing that I put in. And the next thing I'm going to put in is the size. Now, as you can see, size is indeed a number, and we can't have numbers and text and booleans all mixing together without trying to say, let's normalize it and have just one type. So we actually put str in, and then we put size. Just again, so that we get that clear, because we can't have in a print statement lots of different types, we have to make them all one type. So I'm going to make them all strings, because that's the one that makes the most sense. And we're trying to get a printout statement. So we've got name, which is already a string. Then we've got a space, which is a string. Then we're converting this number into a string. Then we need another space as a string. And then we want to have our final variable, which is text. And we do the same thing as before. And as you can see, we could autocomplete because PyCharm here gives us the option to do so. It really knows about the tails variable. So here we go. So then what we need to do is we need to come up to here at the top of the project, and we need to right click and say run. And there we go. We've printed the name. So what we got up here, and we look at what's stored in name. And we print this, and that's there. I've then said I wanted to add a space. We've got that there. I've said I wanted to print a string of the number of the value and size. So size, we go up here, it was the number 12. So I converted that into a string like it is here, which would look a little something like this. Oops, don't know how to put those dots in. Then I've put another space. And then I've put the variable tails, which also has to be converted to a string. Because when we've written true in this sense, this is actually something that's built in to Python. So when Python sees the capitalized version of the word true or false, can you see it changes the color because they're special words? The same way it realizes what an int is, that it's a whole number. So it changes it purple. Okay, so just as easily I could have printed each variable separately. So let's just do that just so you can see what's going on. So there we go, we write print again, we put in a bracket, and then we put name. We do print again, and we do size. We do print again. Whoop. We do print again, and then we do tails. And then if I run this again, we can see if it all works. And look, there we go, it all works. Well done, everyone. You just created your very first bit of code. So I'm actually going to clear this down now. And we're going to work on something slightly different, because it's nice to know that you can make variables and then print them. But when we're coding, we're going to need to know a lot more skills than just that. So let's move on to how we can edit variables. So one thing that's important to know is that when I go name equals Channing, it will print what is stored. If I was to make a print statement there, it will just print Channing, right? Exactly. But if I was to later go name equals Bob, then put in the print statement, do you think it's going to type Channing or Bob? That's right, it's going to type Bob. Because Bob is the last time I've assigned something to the name variable. So we've created the name variable here, but by writing name equals Bob below it, I've actually overwritten the original storage. So the original value that was saved to name has then been almost deleted, and we've put a new name in instead. So it's always going to print the latest version. Now this is very handy within code, because it means that we can change the value of our variables all the time, which is great, because we will need this ability when we're changing things like temperature in a heat control system, or when we want to turn the volume up on our speakers. We have to make it so that the code that runs in the background is flexible and allows changes. Now, equally, we could also change what is in name by changing the piece of text. So I could put Bob plus Chan or space Chan plus Alice or space Alice, because that will give us nice spaces between each one. And then what we're going to do is just print it. And what do you think we're going to see? See, it's instead of looking at this line is now no longer needed, because we've created a name variable with Channing, but then that's been overwritten or deleted and re-entered now as name equals Bob plus space Channing or Chan plus space Alice, which creates this line here as our output. This is how we can go about changing variables. So let's do it with numbers this time. If I have a variable called age, and let's use my age, which is 21. I know I'm pretty old. And then I have another variable below also called age, but I have age equals 21 plus 1. When I print it, when I print age, which value do I expect to see? Do I expect to see 21, 21 plus 1? That's right, you've got it. It's going to show me 22, because that's what 21 plus 1 is. And because the last time I mentioned age was here in this second line of code. So it's ignoring the first line, or overwriting the first line and putting in the second line. And then it's printing out the remainder of the outcome. Now, equally, I could have chosen not to have 21 plus 1 but age equals age plus 1. Now you might think, what is that? I'm saying I want the age to equal itself plus 1. Well, actually, that's exactly what you're saying, because if we wanted to simulate getting older by a year every year that we spend on this planet, then this would be able to do that, because it recognizes the current age plus the old age plus 1, which is very, very handy. And this also means that we can continually add 1 rather than it stopping at a fixed value, because we don't know the value, we can instead use this kind of formula to constantly increase. Now I just showed you how we can change variables. So I'm going to show you a few more cool tricks. If I wanted to, I don't just have to use variables that I already have. I can create some new variables with the totals or calculations of another variable. So that sounds a bit confusing, so I'm going to show you. So in this example, I'm going to have a temperature monitor. And the original temperature, I'm going to call that original, it's going to be 30 degrees. Okay? Now, I can have a variable called hotter, which is equal to 5, and a variable called cooler, which is equal to -5. Now, if you remember before, I said the ints can be positive values and negative values, but as long as they're whole integers, that makes them ints, because int is short for integer. Right, so let's use this idea in this example. So if the original value is 30, I can have another variable I'm going to call new, and I want new to equal the original temperature plus a hotter temperature. I want it to go up by 5. So when I print the new temperature by saying print new, I should have 35. And there we go, I have 35. Now, the only thing I'm going to say is you might want to be a little bit careful with some of the names that you use, because if there is a use of this in a Python package, it might give some unexpected results. So that's just a warning. Okay. But as you can see, my new variable is equal to the original value plus how much I want the heating to go up by, which is the hotter value. And we've used those together to equal the new, and then we've printed what new would be. I could just as easily have put cooler here and then repeated the running of the code. And can you see this time, instead of being 35, it's now 25. That's because what I'm saying is, can I take 30 and can I add a minus number? Or can I take 30, ignore the add, and can I take the original number and minus it by 5? That's what's going on here. That's the calculation. And because it's a computer, it does these calculations easy. So let's move on. And just to prove my example before, I could just as easily have gone original equals the same value that original currently is, plus a value to increase by. When we run that, we get 25 because I didn't write a print statement. So So seeing those values, we should expect 25 and 33. And there we go. Those are our values. So if you guys are feeling confident with this, please continue on with the video. And if you would like to go over this a bit more, please stay and go through the steps again. Now we've seen what some very basic calculations could do. Now I'm going to create another example to show off how we can use those calculations to do something a bit more interesting. I'm going to call it years. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a variable called hour. I'm going to go ahead and set that to 1. Now, how many hours are in a day? Okay, so if I'm going to do day, I'm going to have to do hour times, which is represented by a star, and then 24, because there are 24 hours in a day. Okay, and if I was to print that, what do you expect me to see? Just to check, let's run it. 24, great, so it's working. So now we want to have a variable called week, which equals, now I'm not going to copy this because this isn't necessary anymore, because now day is equal to 24 hours. So instead I can do week is equal to 7 days. So we just use the day variable, which will change because I've asked it to be modified by the times and the value that I want to be modified by. And so now I can go ahead and put another times sign, but this time I'm going to put 7, because now we've created a week, which is worth 7 days. And you'll soon see how we can build this up. In the end, I could change this one variable here, and that will have an effect on all of these variables, because they're all linked. Okay. So let's go even one step further. We're going to have a year. Then we're going to have an equals, and then we're going to put 365. And as you can see, I need to put in here day star 365. Now notice I've used the day variable rather than using the week variable. And this is just to show that we can use the same variables over and over again in our code as much as we need, as long to help us build other statements. But if I wanted to write that in the more accurate way, then I would use the week variable. And I would change this to 52, because we have 52 weeks in the year, but 365 days in a year. Okay, so let's use our skills. Let's print a year and see the value that we get. Now I'm expecting a really big value, because what I'm going to actually be printing when I print year is not how many weeks is in a year or how many days are in a week. It's actually how many hours are in a day, how many days are in a week, how many weeks are in a year, gives us the final total here. So we can see how many hours there are in a year just by doing this little bit of code just here. So as I've already tried out years, I thought I'd move on to weeks and even days. So if we wanted to find out how many hours were in 1 week, we'd write a statement like this: print week, because all we want is 1 week. But if we wanted a statement where we want to know a specific amount of the time period, as in 2 days, we'd have to write it like this: print day times 2. So let's run this code and see what it does. Okay, so there we have our 8,736 hours for our year, 168 hours for the week, and 48 hours is considered 2 days. So there are 48 hours in 2 days. And there we go. You have just completed your first Python program. Well done, everyone. Now that's going to conclude the session for today. I have actually created a trinket for this with the URL below this video. So check that out. The trinkets look like this. You'll come to a page like this, and you'll be able to test out your trinkets. So let's just so you can see what they look like, and give this a quick run. Input a time period, so you can put something like 7 weeks, and it will tell you how many hours are in 7 weeks. As you can see, this is quite, I've written this code, but all I'd like you guys to do is look at it and play around with it, see how it works, maybe make some changes, and everything that's in green is for you guys to do as an extension. So I thought that'd be kind of fun. So yeah, give it a shot, try it out, and say again, I will be putting this URL into the YouTube description, so you can find that quite easily. But you have been a brilliant audience. Thank you very much for listening, and keep doing Python. I look forward to talking to you guys again in our next session. Thank you. Bye.